When looking for the king of podcasts, you're at the wrong channel.
Well, excuse me!
Looking for good ideas for life? You're far from good hands.
Hey, bud, what's your problem?
If you think the listener is always right, you're far from the right place.
Out of order! Even in the future, nothing works!
Hosted by a Northeasterner by birth, but a rebel by choice.
Are you threatening me?
If you want a host that floats between love and madness,
and we know the night is always gonna be here anyway. Thinking of you's working up my appetite, looking forward to a little afternoon delight.
then play on and listen to Crazy Train Radio.
All right, guys, listen to this blues riff and B. Watch me for the changes and try and keep up, okay?
Within the gaming world, there are your general gamers, but then there are those that enjoy the dark underbelly of gaming. If you're one of those that enjoy the dark underbelly of gaming, we certainly got the place to send you. Scorpion Lair Games. That's right, Scorpion Lair Games is the creators of the true crime hit Killers, the card game. Let's not forget they also have Killers Clothing Company, their profiler game, and things like the 5-Minute Murder channel on YouTube. And we certainly can't forget the new book that is certainly a hit, Beyond the Headliners, True Crimes, Myths, and Legends. Make sure you visit Jeff and the Scorpion Lair Games on Facebook and everywhere today.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sam Carchidi, author of Bullies, the story about the Flyers' magical run to Stanley Cup championships and what they've been doing in the last 50 years. And you're listening to Crazy Train Radio.
Hey folks, it's your least favorite host in the podcast world, Croc, Jonathan Steele. And boy, do we have a good one for you today. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. This next guest has been a long-time beat writer and has covered sports for many years. But he is a long-time beat writer covering the Philadelphia Flyers, and he has a new book out on the legendary Broad St Bullies. The new book is called Bullies, but let's go ahead and welcome Sam Carchidi.
Hello. Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
So, Sam, how are you doing, sir? And congratulations on the book.
I appreciate that. Doing well, keeping busy. Have a couple of signings Saturday, so one on the main line and one at the Phantoms game. So keeping busy.
Absolutely. What's the response been? Because I know you've done a couple of signings leading up to this, like at Rexy's you were at and a few other spots. So
yeah, it's been great. We did one at Rexy's with Dave Schultz, did one at Carl's Cards, in Havertown with Bob Kelly. And yeah, we had good crowds at them. We did one at the Wells Fargo Xfinity Mobile Arena with Jeannie Perrant, Bernie's wife, and she was so gracious. We raised some money for the Snyder Foundation, Youth Hockey Foundation. So yeah, it's been good. The people have not forgotten that Bullies team. They love that Bullies team. So and of course it's a 50-year anniversary, so the timing was real good to do that. So yeah, it's been fun.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So speaking of 50 years, and obviously I was born after the Cups because I'm in my 40s, but it's always amazing how well those guys are still received. It never seems like they can walk into a bar and pay for a drink or a meal or whatever the case is. Why do you think there's still such love for the Bullies in particular?
Yeah, well, people from say my generation, they were starved for a winner. You know, back then Philly was called the city of losers. The Sixers were coming off a 9-73 season. The Phillies were a last place team year after year. The Eagles were in last place, and the city was starved for a winner. And lo and behold, the Flyers came along, and I think they represented the city too. They were hard workers, blue collar type team, and they really represented the fans. I mean, that's what Philadelphia is: hard scrabble Philadelphians, and I think they exemplified that more than any other team, especially at that time, and put it all together. And 2 million people came out for the parade, and the next year 2.3 million came out for the parade. It's by far the biggest parade ever in Philadelphia. I think the Eagles drew about 900,000. The police estimated at their last championship, but Philly was just ripe to explode, and they did. And as you said, 50 years later, I think the story's been passed down from generation to generation. And because we go to the signings, yes, there are people in their 60s and even older, 50, 60, 70, that remember them, but there are also younger people, in their 20s and 30s. They've heard the stories passed down and they come out too. And it's nice to see because, those guys really appreciate it. They're real down to earth people, great people. I can't say enough about how great the Flyers were to us in writing this. And we're trying to make a TV series out of this. That's how this actually started. And they could not have been better in dealing with us and making time for us. And I just really have to thank them, not only them, but their families. We talked to wives, ex-wives, their children, people connected with the team. Whether it was Lou Scheinfeld, who was the Flyers vice president back then, were people that work at the ticket office, and on and on and on. They really bent over backwards for us, and it was wonderful, and it was a fun project for Jeff Hare and I. Jeff Hare and I put it together, and like I said, we're still hopeful of making a TV series out of this. We have some episodes written, and we've been dealing with a lot of production studios. One of them was Sylvester Stallone's. He has a production studio, Balboa Productions, and we came close with them with landing the series landing there, but it didn't quite work out. So we're still plugging away.
Yeah, there's a couple of things there, and I just recently heard this afternoon about the relationship that you guys were trying to put together with Balboa Productions. And correct me if I'm wrong, I should say, but I think it was something to do with the international rights. They said that.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. Yeah, that's what they told us. They said they sell most of their stories, their TV episodes. They're like the middleman. They sell it to a streaming service, and Amazon Prime is, one of the main companies that they deal with. And Amazon Prime told them they didn't think it had enough international appeal. I do see a lot of shows on Amazon Prime that to me don't have international appeal. So But that's what they said. And ours actually does have a lot of international appeal because, like, one episode would be, maybe even two, would be on the Flyers game with the Soviet Red Army in 1976, which, captivated the entire world, and of course it includes Europe, especially captivated Europe, and we have a whole chapter on it in our book, and it would be probably at least one episode in our series. That'd be towards the end of it, so we don't have that. The TV series episode that's not written yet, but it is written obviously in the book, and it was just interesting because Clarence Campbell really denounced the Flyers and didn't like their style of play and thought they embarrassed the NHL, and he was not a fan of the Flyers to begin with because when they came in, 6 teams came in and they were all U.S. teams, and he was a Canadian guy, and he was not happy that so many American teams came into the league, and he would find the Flyers, it seemed like every other day, and he just had a lot of bad things to say about their style. Yet when they played the Russians in 1976, he went in and made a speech and told them they were not only representing themselves, they're representing the entire NHL. We're all behind you, and one of the players told him right there, you're being a hypocrite, and the door is over there. They basically told him to leave politely to leave the room, and he did.
Yeah, well, I can believe this, but I won't say that Joe Watson confirmed the story when I talked to Joe in the past, had him here. We still text occasionally and stuff, and it's like there might have been words, something along the lines of "Get the out of here, yeah, you hypocrite. See you later." We don't need no rah-rah speech from you kind of deal.
Eddie Shore?
Oh, piss on Eddie Shore.
Old-time hockey?
Piss on old-time hockey. You're ruining it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Joe
And
may have confirmed something along those lines. So
yeah, and Ed Van Impe was very vocal, I'm told, with Clarence Campbell, and good for the Flyers. They stuck up for themselves. They had an us against everybody else mentality, and in a crazy way, it really helped them. I think it rallied them, made them tighter, and the reputation as Broad Street Bullies. And I don't want people to get the wrong idea. They were more than brawlers. They were very, very talented. They had 3 Hall of Famers and 2 other guys. They had 3 Hall of Famers: Bernie Perrant, Bill Barber, Bobby Clark, and 2 other guys, Reggie Leach and Rick McLeish, were borderline Hall of Famers. But so there was more to them than pushing people around. But they were physical, they were gritty, and they had each other's backs, and on and off the ice. So I don't know if there's ever been a team, or if there ever will be another team in Philadelphia that has the great chemistry that they had, and it, as Barney Brown would say, it was a beautiful thing.
Well, speaking of the Russia game and everything around that, one of the stories I recently heard and read about a little bit, and folks, the Bullies is with Triumph Books, so if you want to grab a copy, check them out online. You can order your copy there. But during that time period, rumor was Ed Snyder wanted to try to learn Russian, and he went to Gene Hart, who was a history teacher as well. Well, what was going on there?
Yeah, we write about that in the book, and we uncovered a lot of things. And we have 1,000 pages of transcripts in Bullies, and that's one of the things we uncovered. That you're right, Gene Hart, Ed Snyder, I should say, went to Gene Hart and said, the Russians are coming in, and I would like to welcome them in their native language, and make a speech at our luncheon to welcome them. And Gene Hart said, they're coming in about a month. I mean, I'll be happy to teach you, but it's going to be difficult. And Ed Snyder said, I do not need a lot, just enough for a few minutes, just to show my respect for them. And Ed's credit and Gene's credit, they worked together, they worked hard. And a month or so later, The Russians are there for a banquet, and the Flyers are there. The game is the next day, and according to the players, the Russians were very disrespectful. This is their view to the Flyers. Like for instance, when Ed Van Impe was introduced, they all started giggling and laughing, and they thought, we're playing an old an old guy. This team is made up because Ed Van Impe looked older than he was. And when Dave Schultz was announced, they all started whispering and pointing at him, and the Flyers thought he was being disrespected, and it got a little heated. And Ed Snyder decided right then, I'm not even going to introduce them. I don't need this. He thought they were disrespecting the Flyers, so I'm not going to, introduce them in Russian, and he didn't. And but that kind of set the stage. They called the Cold War on ice, and it was. And for people who don't know, the Flyers are dominating the game, but it was still nothing. They had so many more scoring chances. They outshot, as it turned out, they outshot them like 40. Flyers outshot the Soviets something like 49-14. And at one point, one of Russia's star players got hit by Van Impe and went to the ground. And for those that don't know, the Soviets skated off the ice in protest. And Ed Van Impe at that time said that if you don't come back, you're not getting paid. So
that was Snyder. Ed Snyder that said that, actually.
Ed Snyder, yeah. Ed Snyder said that. Yeah. Did I say somebody else?
You said Eddie Van Impe. Yeah, he was the one who made the hit.
My bad. Yeah, Ed Snyder.
Yeah, I got your money.
Ed Van Impe gave him support in that, I'm sure, but no, Ed Snyder. That they came back on, the Flyers totally dominated. They scored right away after they came back, and they ended up winning 4-1. It wasn't really even that close. Like I said, the shot domination, and Fred Shear designed a brilliant plan. He flooded the neutral zone because the Russians were used to skating in and making a pass to get in the zone, and then another pass back, and they were a terrific passing team, no question about it. But he plugged up the neutral zone and forced them to just dump it in. They couldn't get in the zone. And as a result, the Flyers liked that style, and they would get out quickly. And it was the Flyers having sustained pressure in their offensive zone, and they totally controlled the game. And Joe Watson, you mentioned him earlier. Joe Watson even scored a goal in that game. Joe was not a scorer; he was a terrific defenseman, not known to be a scorer. And Freddie Shearer told him, "You set back international hockey 50 years by scoring today." But Joe laughs about that. But the Flyers went on and won that game convincingly. So it was an important win, not just for the Flyers, but for the entire NHL.
Absolutely. And it's funny. Well, since we brought up Joe, he's got a book, Thundermouth, which is awesome as well. And when I saw him at a event in Mount Laurel or whatever about a week or so ago, I was hearing him talk about he's got limited copies of that left. So
he's got 200 left. He told me. I just talked to Joe today. He's got 200 left. So he's doing well with that. He did well, and couldn't be happier for him. He's such a wonderful person, and he is the greatest storyteller around.
Oh, isn't he?
Yeah. He has great recall for details, and told me a great story about Bernie Prunt shooting a bear back in Western Canada from a moving train. So I mean, he just has recall and just a great guy.
Oh, yeah. That must have been a trip that Bertie went and met the Watson's father out there in Western Canada.
That is in Smithers, right.
Yep. Like you said, his recall is unbelievable. But I want to bring up Ed Snyder because some stories are here in the book with talking about him growing up in D.C. and he was bullied, but eventually stood up for himself. Got influence from his uncle, and that's kind of where the Bullies personality began. But it really changed after back-to-back playoff losses to the St. Louis Blues, where they were pushed around and stuff. And Ed said that's enough. And who was the general manager at the time? Like, we can't do trades instantly, but it was no, we want to build up and that's where they got Clarkey and Schultze, and they started building what became
Yeah, Bud
the
Poyle was on
legendary
his way
team.
out, and the general man Keith Allen was on his way in. But you're right; they lost to the Blues in four straight in their second year. First year they lost to the Blues in 7 games, but it was highly competitive. The second year, this is the Flyers' second year in existence, so it would have been 68, 69. They get blown out by the Blues, and they lost in 4 straight in the playoffs, and the games weren't even close. And as you mentioned, not only were they blown out on the scoreboard, they were bullied by the Plager brothers, Noel Picard, and they were pushed. Flyers were pushed all over the ice. And Snyder met with Keith Allen after the year and said that this isn't going to happen again. And we got to get tougher, we got to get bigger, and I'm embarrassed. And Keith Allen says, you don't just snap your fingers and make a trade. It's not that easy. And they said, no, I'm talking about long term. I'm talking about the draft. And that year they drafted Bobby Clark, #1. I should mention that. But they also drafted Dave Schultz, Don Selesky. The next year they drafted Bob Kelly. A year or two later they traded for Moose DuPont. So now they were starting to get talent and physicality. And but you're right, it really started. Ed was bullied when he was 10, 12 years old in D.C., and anti-Semitism was rampant. Ed's from a Jewish family, and he really didn't stick up for himself. And one day, his Uncle Sam, who was a brazen guy, told him he had to stick up for himself, and he finally did. And from that day on, he became, I wouldn't say a bully, but I would say he became a tough guy. He was in a lot of scraps growing up. And you could see that feistiness and fight in him, years later, with referees, with fans, at some point opposing fans. And but that's where I talked to a lot of his children, and they think that is really where the Broad Street Bullies originated, where that comes from Ed getting bullied and pushed around as a youngster in D.C. And years later, he said, this isn't going to happen to us. And he had that mentality, and the rest, as they say, is history. But the Flyers didn't get pushed around. But as I said, I don't want people to get the wrong idea. They were a very talented team, and even the guys that weren't superstars, the Bill Clement, guys like Andre Dupont, Terry Crisp, Ross Lonsbury, Bill Flett, Reggie Leach was a borderline superstar. But the guys that were good players, they all knew their role and they played it to perfection. Oris Kinderchuk, I could go on and on. Don Selesky, even guys that weren't fighters, they knew and understood their role, whether it was a penalty killer or somebody on the power play, a Tom Bladen, and they meshed together perfectly. And as a result, they won 2 Stanley Cups, and it might have been 3 in a row. But Rick
You had some guys banged up. Obviously, Bernie was one, and
Bernie was one, and Rick McLeish was the other, and they lost in 4 straight, but every game was competitive, and the Flyers actually had leads, and every game, the last game that they lost, they actually had the lead with like 9 minutes to go and ended up losing. But but that year, the 76 year, 75, 76, they did beat the Soviets. But at the end, when they lost to Montreal, the fans stood up and would not sit down. It was like the game ended. They lost to Montreal, lost the series. And Joe Watson says, he starts skating off and he just stands there looking. It was like the fans were saying, thank you for the 3 years of dominance. And they wouldn't leave the arena. They just stood and cheered. And it was an amazing 3-year run. It's probably the best 3-year run for any sports team in Philadelphia history since the Philadelphia Athletics from 29 to 31. And those A's did the same thing. They won 2 world championships and then lost in the World Series the 3rd year. Flyers did likewise. Some historians believe that might be the best uh, group of baseball teams in history. So,
Especially
you know,
after the 27 Yankees, obviously coming off that time period too.
right, right. So, you can argue that the Flyers were the best since the Philadelphia A's, that 3-year run, or they were the best period. So, I wasn't around in 29, 30, and 31 to look at the A's, but I've read many stories. They were, a powerhouse. There's no question about it. So even if that team was better than the Flyers, hard to compare different sports. But even if that athletics team was better, they were in good company. They're the two biggest dynasties in Philadelphia sports history.
And obviously, we're not talking about the current team, but there's been a rough, say, 8 to 10 years going on here as far as Flyers hockey is concerned, playoff hockey, all that fun stuff. What do you think Ed Snyder would think about this crop of teams we've had?
Ed would be disappointed, but I think he would be encouraged by this year's team. They're finally on the upswing. The losing Tyson Forster now for the rest of the year is definitely a big blow. But they. I'm surprised, to be honest, that Dan Vladar has been as good as he has been, and that's been a real positive because you mentioned that they've struggled for a long time, and most of it is because they haven't had the goaltending. And I know it's only, maybe a little past the 1/3 mark of the season now, and there's a lot of hockey to go. But so far, Vladar has been very good. And yeah, I think Ed would be disappointed, and I think he would want this team to make the playoffs. The Flyers kind of downplay that. I think it's important that they make the playoffs this year. I think, even if they lose in the first round, I think they need to get a taste of it. I think that will go a long way towards next season, and maybe they'll add some free agents. Maybe if they're in the race at the trade deadline in early March this year, and that's going to sneak up because don't forget they're off for 3 weeks because of the Olympics.
Yeah.
So maybe Danny Briere will be a buyer for the first time since he's been the general manager. The first time in a while, the Flyers have been buyers. Of course, they have not made the playoffs for 5 straight years. But even with Forster out, I think that it's important for them to make the playoffs. And I give Rick Tocchet a lot of credit. I think he's gotten the most out of this Flyers team. Are they a great team? Certainly not, but they're a good, solid team. I like the chemistry. They play for each other. And, they got to get Matvei Michkov. They got to get him going. They got to get Tippett going. But, the other guys, they're getting a lot out of these guys. And a lot of that credit goes to Rick Tocchet. Now, the power play, though, that unfortunately has really gone downhill in the last 20 games. They're clicking at about 10%. Before that, they were, in the top 15 in the league and much better than they've been in the past. But they've dropped. Last I looked, they were like 25th in the league, 26th on the power play. If they have any chance to make the playoffs, they have to get back into the middle of the pack because, like I said, they're at 10.4% right now, and that's not going to cut it.
Yeah. And I remember when Rick played the last half of his career, and Rick reminds me a lot of that bully mentality, just that old school hockey mentality, which I think the Flyers certainly need it to have somebody in there that, has that, chutzpah about them.
Yeah, and they need a scorer too. There's no question about it. I mean, you look at those teams back in the day. You had Barber, McLeish, Leach, Flett, Clark. I mean, even Lonsberry had 31 year. I mean, they had so many different scorers that could beat you. And if a line had an off night, the next line would pick it up. Gary Dornhofer, didn't mention him. I mean, they had a lot more offensive weapons than this team. This team has to win with defense and goaltending. They definitely need scorers, and that's why losing Forster really hurt them. But hopefully some of these guys that aren't really that young anymore, I'm talking about like the Tippetts and guys like that, will keep developing, and Konechny even will pick up their scoring as the season progresses, because they're going to have to. They're going to have a couple guys score 30 goals And I don't know if they can win a lot of games 2-1. And like I said, hopefully Danny Briere makes an addition or two at the trade deadline. And I'm not talking about getting, a guy that's 35 or 36. I'm talking about getting a guy that's maybe 29 or 30 and has, some good years ahead of him. So we'll see how it plays out. But I do think it is important. I may be in a minority among the players, but I think it's important that they make the playoffs this year.
Absolutely. Two more questions I have for you, and thank you for the time, sir. Dave Schultz obviously is beloved, and his legend has grown, like you were saying at the beginning of this, about, legend being passed down through generations and stuff at this point. But Dave has a certain hate. I don't know if hate's the word, because of the fighting and stuff, and wish he was a different player at the time. Do you know what kind of player he wanted to be?
Yeah, I think he just wanted to be a physical player, but I don't think he wanted to be a fighter per se. He told me, I did a book signing with him at Rexy's about 10 days ago or so, he reiterated that he never was in a fight off the ice in his life. He got good at it in the minor leagues, but he understood his role. I mean, at that time, he understood it. But when he looks back on it, he says, that wasn't me. I wanted to be a more all-around player. He did score 20 goals his first year and some big goals in the playoffs and set up maybe the biggest goal in Flyers history, Bobby Clarke's goal in game number 2 of the finals in 1974. So, was he a great player? Certainly not, but he could hold his own. And that line with Selesky and Horace Kinderchuk, even when they didn't score, they changed the momentum of a game because their forechecking and their physical play, they kept the puck down the other end a lot. And Bob Kelly would be on that line sometimes, or be on a separate line with Billy Clement and some others. And like I said before, these guys knew their roles, and they played it perfectly. And but getting back to your question, Dave, I think would have liked to have been a more all-around player, but he's still upset to this day that he was traded to Los Angeles, because he said he never felt more comfortable than when he was in Philadelphia. And it really bugged him that he was traded to LA. And he said, as a result, he didn't enjoy the second cup as much as the first one, because there were rumors all year that he was going to get traded. And he didn't until a little bit later, but he said it was always on his mind. And, but, you talk about guys that stood up for the Flyers and gave the Flyers, Freddie Shearer always says this, gave the Flyers courage on the road. They became a very good road team, and they weren't before Schultz was there. And Schultz gave them courage, and because Bobby Clarke knew if he went into the corner and he would have more room, because if somebody went after him, Schultz would go after that guy. There's no question about it. And but they, as I said, they knew their roles and they created energy. Good example is Bob Kelly, who is not known as a scorer, but Mike Nickluck. He was the assistant coach, and this is Cup 2 in 1975, and there was a 0-0 game in the third period, and Nickluck said, "Why don't we put Kelly out there with the top line to start the period and see if we can't get something going?" And he did. And Kelly was out there with Leach and Clarke, and Clarke battled behind the net, got the puck to Kelly in front. He beat Crozier, and one of the biggest goals in Flyers history. And but Kelly did that. As I said, even if he didn't score, he created momentum. He would bounce off one guy and into another guy, and he just gave them energy. But that goal, I couldn't be happier that it was scored by somebody like Bob Kelly, because he was such a hustler and such a team player. And those guys did not care, believe me, about their goals or points. All they cared about was winning games and winning the Stanley Cup. And hopefully this current Flyers team, gets that feeling. I can see them developing it. I think they're a real close knit team, this Flyers group right now, and I think they can learn a lot from the Broad Street Bullies. Actually, by the way the team was cohesive and had chemistry, and they did everything together. I mean, they would come back from a 10-game road trip, and they would come home, say hello to their kids and their wives, and they would all go out together that night after being on the road. I mean, sometimes the wives just shook their heads, but that's how tight and close that team was.
Well, we can't obviously talk about the Broad Street Bullies without mentioning one Bernie Perrant. And still hard to believe he's been gone, what, month and a half, 2 months at this point?
Yeah, a little over 2 months now. Yep.
And obviously, those teams had a lot of personality. And I've been fortunate to interact with a lot of those guys over the years. And Bernie probably had the biggest personality of them all, at least that I've dealt with. Would you agree with that?
No question, no question. I mean, Bernie, he if there was a charity event, Bernie was there. If there was a food line and people were scooping out soup for the homeless, Bernie was there. I mean, just the kindest, most affable guy. I've been covering sports for over 50 years, and he's number one on my list. I mean, no offense to the other, there are a lot of great guys out there, but Bernie stands above and beyond, and nobody's really a close number two. I mean, just an amazing person, and sometimes he was such a good guy and such a doer, and such a big personality, as you said, that you forgot, for instance, that he was one of the greatest goaltenders in NHL history. And just give you a little example, he would text me on Father's Day and say, "Hey, just thinking of you. Hope you're having a good Father's Day. Hope you're having a good day." I mean, who does that? I mean, he just went out of his way.
There's not many I could think of.
Yeah, I mean, he was a people person, went out of his way, and him and Jeannie, I think they were married about 10 years, and I've never seen Bernie happier than he was the last 10 years of his life. And I just, like you, I can't believe he's gone, because he had such a vibrant personality, and he was 80, and 80's not old, but he had the heart of a 25-year-old, and he was in good physical shape except for his back. And he looked like he worked out all the time. He looked like he was maybe 60. And I talked to Bernie maybe 30 hours before he passed, and he was joking with me. And it's just hard to believe. It's just such a loss, not only for the Flyers, but for the city and for humanity, for the world. He was just the number one guy, and I can't tell you how much I miss him. He was just such a wonderful person, and he never left. This is probably the best way to say it. I never had a conversation with Bernie where I didn't leave it feeling better about myself or about life. He had that knack for making everything seem great in this world, and what a legacy to have.
Yeah, he was one of the good ones. And I guess the last question I would want to ask, and I can't believe I would kick myself if I didn't ask, is the nickname, the Broad Street Bullies, was almost an afterthought. Why would you say something like that? Because obviously it would make sense because of that South Philly toughness, and especially that time period and just everything else. But why would the nickname that's lasted for all these years be an afterthought?
Oh, it's yeah, it's the legacy of Jack Chevalier and Pete Caffone, who worked for the old Evening Bulletin. Yeah, Jack Chevalier was the Flyers beat writer at that time for the Evening Bulletin. Great paper, by the way. Pete Caffone was a sports copy editor, and Chevy wrote Chevalier's nickname was Chevy. Chevy wrote a story about the Flyers beating Atlanta in Atlanta. It was a 3-1 win, but it was a penalty-filled game, and a lot of fisticuffs and not only that, just a lot of chippy play, I should say. It's probably the best way. And of course, they were playing that way the whole year. This was 1973, the year before they won the Cup, 72-73 season. And Jack wrote a story, and in the story, he called them the Blue Line Banditos. And he sent it in, and Pete Caffone, the copy editor, read it, and Chevy sent the story and he said, "I'll talk to you tomorrow," and that was it. And Jack went back after interviewing the players. Back then, there was no internet. You didn't have to write right away. The deadlines were much later. You didn't have to file your story as the game ended, and it's online 5 seconds after the game ends. So he had more time, and he just started rereading his story, and he just didn't like his nickname, the Blue Line Banditos. And he called Pete Caffone, and he said, "Pete, I don't know what I was thinking, but I don't like the nickname that I put in there. And why don't you change it to the Bullies of Broad Street?" And he did. And Pete said to him, "Yeah, I wasn't crazy about it either." And Jack said, "Well, why don't you tell me?" He said, "Well, they're your words. You're the writer, you know." And but Pete Caffone took the Bullies of Broad Street and shortened it because it wouldn't fit in the headline. And he shortened Bullies of Broad Street to Broad Street Bullies because it saved him a couple characters and it fit in the headline. And I actually have a copy of that. I put it on social media, the first headline that had Broad Street Bullies in it. And lo and behold, it stuck and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And Pete said to me, if we would have known how popular it was, we would have copyrighted it and had a trademark on it. Jacques Chevalier died maybe 8 years ago or so, and we had a memorial service for him, fittingly at the Broad Street Bullies Cafe, right down the street from the then Wells Fargo Center. It was very appropriate, but now the Flyers are known. If you say Broad Street Bullies, people that are hockey fans know who you mean. I bring up Joe Watson again. He said that a buddy of his was in Prague in the Czech Republic a few years ago, and he relayed the story to Joe, and he said, the cab driver there said, "Where are you from?" And he said, "Philadelphia." And he said, "Oh, the Broad Street Bullies." And this is somebody that's from the Czech Republic. And this is, at the time, it was nearly 50 years ago that the Flyers were nicknamed the Broad Street Bullies. And he knew Philadelphia is the Broad Street Bullies. So that's a cool story. And the Flyers, Joe Watson says this, and a lot of them say it. They liked the nickname. Clarkey says this, that because it gave them an identity. And, they sold out all over the NHL, set attendance records in opposing arenas, and because of their image, people came because they wanted to see a fight. A lot of people did anyway. And the Broad Street Bullies, I think will live. That name will live forever, and it's passed on from generation to generation. And like you said, you weren't around when they won their cups, but obviously you've probably heard Broad Street Bullies 10,000 times.
From the time I was, yeah. And I believe it was Fred Sheridan, the head coach of those teams, said, winning a championship, you guys will walk together forever.
Yeah, win today, we walk together forever, and they do. I mean, we interviewed so many of them and met some of them together, and like Jimmy Watson and Gary Dornhofer. We were at Jimmy Watson's rink, and Dorney was there, and you can just see, they just have this chemistry. It's hard to explain. They finish each other's sentences. They have walked together forever, and even if they don't see each other for a year or two, they pick up right where they left off, and it's just amazing to see. You could see it at Bernie's memorial service, when they were all there. But Freddie was absolutely right, and Freddie was way ahead of his time, and he implemented some of the techniques of the Russians, and he was always studying the game, always trying to get ahead. In fact, after they won their second cup, Freddie went to Russia to attend their practices and just to learn more. I mean, he had a thirst for more knowledge. And but getting back to what he wrote on the blackboard. He he knew what he was writing. Funny story too. I'll just add this: that Lindy Snyder, Ed's daughter, her and Ray Shiro and all of the people that were like 10, 12, 13 years old during that time would be running around the bowels of the spectrum, and they would erase Fred Shiro's blackboard and put their own message on there. And being naive kids, they would sometimes sign their names on there, and who the guilty party was. And I always wondered what would have happened if they erased Fred Shiro's "Win Today, We Walk Together Forever," if they had gotten in there that day and erased that, because that's probably one of those famous quotes, or the most famous, I'd say, in Flyers history. But so we have a chapter in our book, Bullies, about the kids and their influence and their relationships with their dads, and we talk about their wives. They were a big part of the Flyers' success. So we try to find behind the scenes stories, but I appreciate you taking the time, Jonathan, to let me talk about it. And
Yeah, of course.
hope
I
people
got one for you. Here you go with it, since you brought up the kids. And Jackie, I'm sorry if you don't. I'm going to tell the story. Yeah, Jackie Clark, one of Bob's daughters, did a book called Flyers Lives years ago, and I did this with her, but I did it at her house in Haddonfield at the time. So, we finish up and whatever, we're just BSing, and she was showing me some pictures, of Dad throughout his career and different things and stuff. And she shows me a picture of Bobby Clark when he met Prince Charles.
Yes.
Right? They're in a greeting line. And
Yeah, I've seen the picture. Yep.
Okay. So one of her sons, she has twins, and they were young, maybe 2.5 or so, give or take. One of the boys comes upstairs from the playroom, because they were down playing as we were chatting, comes upstairs, and she shows the picture to the son. I don't remember which one. I apologize. But she goes, "Who's this? Is that Pop-Up?" And the kid looks up and goes, "No, Mom. Pop-Up's old. That's not Pop-Up." Right? Oh, I start tearing up laughing, because kid, he's like, "No, Pop-Up's old. That's not Pop-Up." Oh.
Yeah. I can see I have 2 young grandkids myself, and they'd probably say the same about their poppy, me.
Yeah.
So I can relate. But give me a good idea. I've been running pictures of the Broad Street Bullies on the social media. The wives, the players, Kate Smith, anybody connected to that team. And I'll have to dig out that picture. I think people would enjoy that of Clarkie and Prince Charles. That's a good one, because I know I have that somewhere in my archives.
Nice. Since you mentioned social media, where can people find you if they choose to?
Yeah, I'm at Broad Street Bull, and it's Broad ST and BULL, and you can find me there on Twitter, X, if you will, and look for me on Facebook and Instagram, and my email is samcarchidi55@gmail.com, and again, I appreciate the time, Jonathan, and I hope people enjoy Bullies.
Sam Carchidi, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. It was fun talking to you, and always great to talk about the great days of the Flyers, and hopefully another Stanley Cup is on the horizon in a few years.
Hello out there, we're on the air. It's hockey night tonight. Tension grows, the whistle blows, and the puck goes down the ice. The goalie jumps and the players bump, and the fans all go insane. Someone roars, Bobby scores at the good old hockey game. Oh, the good old hockey game is the best game you can name.
Hey folks, looking for the ultimate destination for the nerd enthusiasts and collectors? Well, we found the spot for you. Nerds Nest Collectibles is a haven for nerds, geeks, and fans alike, as they have many different products and certainly more to come. make sure you go ahead and visit them at nerdsnestcollectibles.com. Check them out.
Hey, Joe Watson here, and you're listening to Crazy Train Radio. And it's a great show, so tune in, and you'll enjoy the stories. He has a lot of great guests that he has, and you'll enjoy them.